Gun violence is an ongoing cycle that has always continued throughout history, and many people have misunderstood as well as misused their rights and responsibilities when it comes to owning firearms. In fact, gun violence is currently being aided by things such as the latest permitless gun law passed by Senator of Louisiana Blake Miguez. While it may seem to protect Second Amendment rights, it raises significant concerns about the safety of our communities and the potential misuse of firearms.
Centuries have seen gun rights create a lot of altercations and tragedies in American history. Indeed, the right to bear arms was given through the Second Amendment ratified on December 15, 1791, which allowed any person to defend oneself and one's property over the years. It has evolved as a two-way sword assisting not only each individual but some criminal and deadly aspects.
I'm Trooper James with Louisiana State Police.
Are there any challenges you face when trying to prevent people from using their Second Amendment irresponsibly?
Yes, it's an ongoing issue that we have in society today. I believe guns are very easily accessible, especially for juveniles. But then again, that's why I solely believe in the Second Amendment right, which is the right to bear arms for people to be able to protect themselves. And getting guns off the street is a lot of things that we do. Stolen guns, guns with those are called switches, I guess you can say. But I don't think there is ever going to be a way to limit the amount of guns that are being sold illegally and actually having people being able to possess those. So we can dig down on like gun laws and things of that nature. But again, I believe that people with their intentions, they're going to do what they want to do anyways. So I believe that it is right for somebody to be able to protect themselves based off the Second Amendment and possess a firearm, but as long as they do it the correct way and the legal way.
At what point does the right of bearing arms become a breach in the safety of others? Such as the Second Amendment gives some freedom, this places a gigantic burden on citizens to practice responsibility. Alas, from history, a lot of people use this right rather irresponsibly, and there are times the consequences are awful. Take the case of the Colfax Massacre. The Colfax Massacre took place on April 13, 1873 in Louisiana. It is one of the most regretful moments in our state's history. It may not have been the first major shooting incident that has taken place, but it still goes to the credit of being one of the most deadliest. It was a racial hate-driven and right-suppressing massacre of newly freed African Americans during the Reconstruction era. These armed white supremacists were convinced their Second Amendment rights approved the killing of many black militiamen endeavoring to guard a local courthouse against further white league-type terrorist attacks at Colfax. It was a horrific and violent, causing several dozen black men to be slaughtered in cold blood with the help of their firearms that they continued to use unresponsibly. Casualties vary, but reports read that the murder consisted of more than 150 black men deaths on that day.
It set a very bad model while showing just how quickly guns become instruments of terror if put into the wrong hands. While we might think these obvious acts of violence were simply part of history, in actuality, the same patterns continue today. Gun violence remains one of the painful issues in Louisiana, but this new permitless carry law has initiated the fire. Of course, allowing individuals to carry firearms without a permit or appropriate background checks created an atmosphere where guns become more accessible and accountability at a low. An environment like this undoubtedly will encourage violence. Consider the shooting that occurred on New Year's Day 2025 along Bourbon Street in New Orleans. What could and should have been a joyous celebration to welcome in a new year became an utter tragedy. 14 lives were lost that day to senseless violence. The families were broken and the community was left to grieve yet again. It wasn't a secluded incident, but it was part of a greater pattern of increased gun violence in Louisiana. Over the years until 2025, Louisiana has been in the first rank of states with gun violence incidents. In a time when lawmakers like Senator Miguez argue that less strict gun laws will empower citizens, the fact remains that it equally empowers malicious people who are constantly proving they are irresponsible. And let's not forget the broader impact of gun violence. It is not just the individual victims, but whole communities. When shootings occur, they leave behind a ripple effect of trauma. The families have lost a loved one, kids grow up without parents, and there comes emotional and economic fallout from these incidents. In many cases, these communities are already facing other challenges, and then gun violence intensifies the issue. The cycle of gun violence is exhausting, and it feels as though we're stuck in an endless loop. The same arguments are made over and over again. Some say stricter gun laws will infringe upon their freedoms, while others argue that these gun laws are necessary to protect the lives of innocent people. But in all those debates, one thing that is usually lost is responsibility. The Second Amendment protects rights, and with those rights, the requirement for responsible handling. When people don't live up to that, the result is nothing less than catastrophic. The Colfax massacre, the Bourbon Street shooting, the school shootings, the list just goes on, and it continues to turn this country into one horrifying reality of what firearms can do if they fall into someone who takes advantage of their rights. They also illustrate a need for stricter regulations and making sure guns don't fall into the wrong hands. Background checks, training requirements, and permits. They're not just sporadic hurdles, they're measures designed to save lives.
Ultimately, it is not about taking away rights from anyone, but rather making sure those rights are exercised responsibly. The Second Amendment was never meant to be a gateway for reckless behavior. It's a privilege that comes with enormous responsibility, and U.S. lawmakers, citizens, and communities must treat it as such.
These policies like permitless carry law might sound like a victory to gun rights advocates, but at what massive cost? We need leaders who would not resist but make change by creating the safety of their cities a priority, rather than ignoring the cries for help made by parents and victims that suffer the consequences of gun violence. It may be difficult, but if we are serious about building safer communities when our futures can flourish and not perish, it is our responsibility to be willing to comfort the threats made by people being irresponsible as they participate in carrying a gun. As we reflect on the history of gun violence in Louisiana, it is an ongoing threat as long as many citizens who own guns use it to threaten others. The lives of our friends, families, and neighbors depend on our ability to use our Second Amendment right in a responsible manner. To do so, we can be responsible for performing universal background checks that would help keep firearms out of individuals with criminal records or a history of violence. We can also be responsible for community-based intervention programs. Like other states that encourage this idea, which have shown promise in reducing violence, these programs will and can provide resources, mentorship, and conflict resolution training to address the problem before it escalates.